This is the Smart Poker Study Podcast for players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Through strategy discussions, Q&As, and Poker Pro interviews, we'll dive deep into everything related to poker tactics, study techniques, and the mental side of the game. All in an effort to improve your skills, maximize your profits, and to make you a lifelong successful player. This podcast is brought to you by SmartPokerStudy.com, and I'm your host, Sky Matsuhashi. Poker people, in episode 18, I reviewed the 10 most common poker leaks, discussed symptoms of each, and gave you ways to start fixing them. Hey poker people, it's day 13 in my 30-day challenge to release a new podcast every day. And yes, 13 is my lucky number. And that's not a joke. You know, when I was in junior high school, I won a trip to Hawaii with the number 13. My mom and I were at the mall and there was a kiosk with a spinning number wheel. The grand prize, if you hit your number, the number that you chose, the grand prize was the trip to Hawaii. I chose the number 13, spun the wheel, and bam! I hit it. I won that grand prize. I didn't get to go, my parents went. My mom might have actually given the prize to my uncle. I can't really remember. But it was great just winning something like that. But the bad thing is I haven't won anything since then with that number, with the number 13. But once lucky, always lucky. And today is the final day for the iTunes review contest. Get your review screenshot to me by tonight for your chance to win a free hour of coaching. Tweet it to @SmartPokerStudy or email it to sky@smartpokerstudy.com. Now for today's show. I've mentioned The Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler and Barry Carter plenty of times, and it's finally time I discussed it. After yesterday's podcast number 18, which had Tilt as the number one leak in the top 10 most common leaks list, it seemed like the ideal time. Yep, the ugly elephant in the room, Tilt, that's something that we all know is there, but we don't address until way later in our poker career, maybe until it's taken over our poker career, If you're new to poker, you're going to want to get the book and start working on Tilt before you do any other type of poker game improvement. And if you're an old hat, drop what you're doing, pick up this book, and work on this often overlooked aspect to your game. So as an overview for this episode, I'll begin by talking about the mental game of poker as a whole, then I'll get into the parts of the book that I found most useful. I'll tell you how you can get the book for free, and of course I'm sure you'll want to hear that if you haven't picked the book up yet, and I'll give you a challenge to start controlling your tilt tonight. And of course, everything I discuss here will be in the show notes for this episode, which you can find and follow along at smartpokerstudy.com/19. Now here it is, today's podcast mission. My mission for today. At the end of this podcast, you'll rush to get your own copy of The Mental Game of Poker so you can start working on improving your mental game now. So this book, The Mental Game of Poker, sat on my shelf for years before I actually put to use what was in the book. I remember I picked it up sometime shortly after Black Friday when I got back into poker here, online poker here in the US. It was such a bummer of a time having no more Poker Stars, and it took me a while to dive back into the, US-friendly sites. And when I did, I promptly went back to my old ways of being Tilty McSpewerson. I was never bad enough to bust a mouse, a keyboard, my monitor, a hole in the wall, none of that, but I came darn close sometimes. So I bought this book at Barnes & Noble, read it, and for some reason I just promptly shelved it. I can't recall why I didn't put it to use back then, but it was probably because I thought I could conquer my tilt on my own and didn't need any help. I learned a little bit just from reading the book and maybe, hey, this is good enough, I'll get over my tilt. But I probably read the book kind of out of obligation because it was the book everybody was talking about at the time. So my tiltiness just continued through the years, and I'm sure I lost or missed out on tons of profit because of it. But my tilt kept getting worse as time went on. It got to the point that every session I played, and I really do stress every single session, I would end it earlier than I intended because of tilt. The smallest thing would set me off, like if I got sucked out on by a fish, I started to tilt. If I lost the first of 15 sit-and-goes planned for that session, I would start to tilt and make bad decisions leading to even more losses. I would miss the money in one tournament, then spew off my stacks in other tournaments trying to make up for that one loss. So poker got to the point where I would start each session already angry with the mindset of, well, it's going to be another shitty session. If I continued on like this for too much longer, I would have quit poker. So at this point stepped in the mental game of poker to the rescue. I finally realized that, I was in this weird mental funk and I decided to try and fix it, and I recalled that I owned a copy of the book, but never put any of it to use. I figured reading the book again couldn't hurt, so I picked it up for a second read through to see if it could help my game. And boy did it. This second reading was so enlightening. The book is very well written and to the point, not any fluff at all. The text concisely taught me how to recognize tilt and my other mental game issues. I thought tilt was the only issue, but confidence and fear were issues as well, so those chapters really helped out. I found the client stories also very useful, as they're kind of like testimonials for Jared's ideas. The stories were very relatable and gave good insight into mental game issues from other players' perspectives. I began putting to use the techniques I learned right away, and I saw a marked improvement in my mental state as I played. I wasn't tilting as much, not quitting sessions as often, starting off in a positive mindset, and many of the situations that caused my tilt stopped affecting me as severely. And I know if I got this much out of the book, so will you. So a little bit more just about the book. The chapters are arranged in a very logical manner, with each building upon the last, as most instructional books do. The first 4 expertly give readers an understanding of mental game problems and how to resolve them, like understanding how our game suffers due to tilt, how we learn effectively through the adult learning model, inchworm concept, and the process model, the role emotions play in our poker game, and then it gives you strategies for resolving mental game issues. And the reason why I'm talking about the layout of the chapters is that many people probably pick up this book and skip directly to the tilt that they're suffering from. Well, this could be helpful, but the info before all the different types of tilt is what really aids in understanding the mental game, and the strategies in the early chapters set up the understanding necessary of how to work on your mental game. So in reading through the book here, Chapter 2 discusses the adult learning model, and this was very enlightening, especially when they talk about the unconscious competence and how the goal is to develop skills to that level so that we naturally revert to these at times of stress or high emotions. I discussed the unconscious competence a little bit in podcast number 8 about focus sessions. The reason why we want to develop skills to the level of unconscious competence is because skills that reside here are used without even thinking about it. It's like automatically folding 7 deuce off pre-flop. We don't even consider this as a hand to play. We just see it and muck it, no thinking at all. But what if we develop the skill of double barreling or 3-betting pre-flop to the level of unconscious competence? Then we'd free up so much more brain space for other, even more difficult decisions at the tables. And I did podcast number 5 recently, and that was about warm-ups and cooldowns. And this is actually something I never did until I read about it in the mental game of poker. It's now a ritualistic part of every session I play, and I credit a lot of my improvement in my game to the warm-ups and the cooldowns that I do. They really do help to minimize my tilt, and you can read a ton about how this helps your game within the mental game of poker. And I've mentioned playing your A game and C game before, and this is of course where I learned about these concepts. Once you quantify the skills that are part of your C game, you can begin to improve your overall game gradually using an inchworm approach. And this was a novel idea to me within this book here. I'd never heard of the inchworm approach before, but what it is, the inchworm approach is working to improve the lagging parts of your game while adding new skill sets to your A game or unconscious competence. So your overall skill set is constantly increasing as you work on both ends of your game. You're improving your A game and adding skills to it, plus you're working on how often you play your A game, trying to increase that, and you're lopping off those leaks that are part of your C game, and by increasing the amount of time you play your A game, you play your C game less often, so you're making more money, making better decisions, playing better at the tables. Another concept that's really helped me is the idea of injecting logic. This is an awesome strategy that the book discusses, which is simply saying logical statements to yourself to help your mind cope with an undesirable situation. These logic statements are peppered throughout the rest of the book in sections where they can have the biggest impact on different tilt issues. One of the logic statements that I'm currently using in my warm-ups and as I play is, you can't control how you run, so don't focus on it. And this logic statement actually reminds me of one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's from a book called Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. And within the book, there's a character named Court, and he's talking to the gunslinger. And the gunslinger was just a pupil, a student of his at the time. And what he said to the gunslinger was, "Control what you can control, maggot, and let everything else take a flying fuck at you. And if you must go down with your guns blazing." Yeah, I love Stephen King. And of course, the biggest section of the book is Chapter 5. It's actually 80 pages long, and it covers 7 different types of tilt and how to recognize and resolve each. For me, running bad tilt, injustice tilt, and entitlement tilt are the big areas of focus, and these sections have really allowed me to break down my tilt issues and begin resolving them. Beyond the chapter on tilt, this book covers 3 very important aspects of the mental game: fear, motivation, and confidence. These sections opened my eyes to a lot of the underlying psychological ideas that were stalling my progress. I didn't realize that I had a fear of losing money, fear of making bad decisions. That didn't really occur to me before I read this section of the book, and it totally applies. And also the lack of confidence. When you're thinking about moving up in levels, or maybe your bankroll took a hit so you're forced to move down, those really affect your confidence, which affects how you play and can lead to a lot of C game play. Well, reading this chapter as well really helped me to work on my confidence levels. So since I read this book and I started implementing the important ideas in the book, I've noticed an enormous improvement in my mindset before, during, and after sessions. I tilt a whole lot less, I play longer, and have more confidence in my game. I'm far from being a mental game expert, but on the spectrum, if you look at the mental game as a spectrum, I'm closer to the mental game shark side of things than I am to the mental game fish side of things. And that's all thanks to this book and the work I've been putting in to get better. I highly recommend the mental game of poker to every player in the world, regardless of game or stakes played. The concepts covered and skills you gain from it are invaluable and will lead to major improvements for everyone. This is a timeless piece of poker learning, and I'm sure that 50 years from now, players will still be talking about it. Challenge! Here's my challenge to you for this episode. Get your copy of The Mental Game of Poker right now. You can order it through my Amazon affiliate link in the show notes. And I mentioned earlier about getting it for free. And you can do so by visiting audible.com through my affiliate link in the show notes as well. And for doing that, you'll get a copy of any audiobook of your choice for free. And I recommend signing up for an account and getting The Mental Game of Poker as your free audiobook. You can start listening to it today right after this podcast. So get the book, read it, or listen to it, implement it, and kick tilt to the curb. Now it's your turn to take action and do something positive for your poker game.
Oh, that's it now. Get out there and be somebody. Go write a book.
Okay, to recap the episode, I discussed very simply the Mental Game of Poker book and how it can help your game. I talked about some of my favorite parts in the book, and I gave you one of my logic statements, plus a way that you can get the book for free. Please go to the show notes at smartpokerstudy.com/19 for everything mentioned here. And while you're there, sign up for the smartpokerstudy.com newsletter, and for doing that, I'll send you my Ultimate Poker Resource Guide for free. This guide is chock full of info that will help you excel at the tables. Thank you so much for listening today. Send me your constructive feedback through the show notes page at smartpokerstudy.com/19. You can also send an email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com, tweet me at smartpokerstudy, or post in the Facebook group at smartpokerstudy.com/discuss. And I need your questions for the Friday episodes. Please send them through all the channels just mentioned, and I want to hear your ideas for podcast topics you'd like me to discuss. You need help on something? Let me know. And for an iTunes review, we got a great one from Brad Harker. Brad says, "Awesome! 5 stars. There is such an art to poker, and this podcast very eloquently highlights the strategies and skills of top-level performance. Great show." Well, thank you so much, Brad. I really appreciate that review. Keep sending them in, everybody. And remember, today is the last day for the contest, so tweet me your iTunes review by sometime tonight to be entered in the Hour of Free Coaching contest. Alrighty, poker people, be sure to listen to tomorrow's episode number 20, where I discuss my poker game and my progress in hitting my smart poker goals for 2016. Word of mouth is the best advertising, and a recommendation from you to your friends would be most appreciated. If you enjoyed our time together and learned a little something, please share it with a pal. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.